What it do, Dream Team? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction video. I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos pop up between America and Russia and missiles being fired and, you know what I'm saying, practices going on near borders. Now America's sending submarines or ships and Russia's sending submarine or ships, and it's been a lot of tension, I assume. So here we are with, is America ready for war with Russia? Hopefully this guy can illuminate more on the topic. I don't know too much about everything that goes on, but I definitely want to start learning more about everything going on in the world, about geopolitics and about why countries want to go to war or what would start a war. Before we dive into this though, make sure you guys subscribe, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up, and let's dive right in.
Is the United States ready for a war with Russia? So last week this guy wrote me and he told me that he feels bleak because he thinks war is coming. And based on the video I did on Friday where I said World War III has already started, I don't necessarily think he's wrong. And he wrote me a series of questions, and I figured I would answer them in front of all of you while having my morning cigar and my morning drink. Although this is, instead of a whiskey, this is an Orange Crush. I am in Virginia Beach right now.
That's pretty dope.
So let's start off with the first question. What does the U.S. government constitute as being ready for war? How do you define yourself as being ready? Or how would a nation define itself as being ready? So I guess in one circumstance, there's really no such thing as being ready. It's almost like saying, are you ready to have another kid? There's no ready. You might think you're ready to have that kid, but you're never really going to be ready.
I get
for
that.
The disruption that new child brings into your life, right? But you can be more prepared. And I certainly think that the U.S. military is highly prepared for whatever conflict the world decides to throw at it. I've been embedded with 101st Airborne, with the 82nd Airborne, some of the most elite soldiers on the planet. And these guys are highly motivated and they are ready to fight. And when I take a look at the logistics capability of the U.S., I often go back to my story about chicken patties. How when I was in Egypt, we had all of these chicken patties that were about to expire, so we cooked them all and ate them all and gave the leftovers to the Egyptians. And the Egyptians couldn't even feed their own people in their own country because their soldiers only got meat when they rotated back to their main base.
Oh, wow.
So from a logistical standpoint, we still have good logistical capability. From a fighting standpoint, our soldiers are highly motivated and they are ready to do what what their leaders tell them to do. So the second question is in
the first question, I love how he pointed out, he was like, are you ready? I mean, you may think you're ready, but you're never like truly ready. There's never a right time, and you're never ready for all the disruption and everything it can cause. And I love how he made the analogy to like having a second child. Made it very easy to understand. Next thing is, I also love how he said, now there's different, like, is America prepared? They're as prepared as they can be. While you may not be able to predict everything, you may think you're ready and all these disruptions, you can be well prepared. And he says America is well prepared logistics wise, and also all these elite soldiers are willing and ready to fight at any given moment. And so, I mean, the soldiers are in place and logistics, everything's good, but it's just like having that second kid. You may think you're ready, but you don't know what all is gonna come with that. So you may think you're ready, but I guess you'll never truly be ready. I love that explanation in the first one.
Is the U.S. currently ready for a war with China? So God forbid deterrence fails and the United States and our allies have to go to war with China. Yes, I think we are ready, because remember, it's not just the U.S. Say, is the U.S. currently at war with China? We have a coalition of multiple allies in the Pacific. So that would be Australia. That's a major partner. Great Britain, France, South Korea, Japan, Canada. We also have most likely the Philippines would roll in as well. The Philippines would love to help out in that kind of endeavor. And the Philippine Army is actually a pretty darn good army. And they're used to operating in the littorals, which would be necessary for any kind of conflict with China. So part of the plan for war in the Pacific, I actually covered during my video about Project Convergence Capstone 4, where I talked about any sensor, any decider, any shooter. So the U.S. and its allies have worked out a way to share data and information so that if an Australian Special Forces team spots a PLA missile launcher, then they can radio that information up to a plane where the decider sits, and that decider can find the best effector, which is a weapon system. What's the best effector that can affect that target and survive counter battery fire? So theoretically, you could have this Australian Special Forces dude talk to an American in a plane, and the American tells a Filipino HIMARS launcher to fire at a target they don't even see.
Oh, dang.
So yeah, we're ready in that sense. There are some issues, like the U.S. doesn't quite have enough ships. Our magazine capacity isn't as great as China when it comes to raw missiles, but that's why we have the any sensor, any decider, any shooter doctrine. And the next is the U.S. currently ready?
So I love that. I love the fact in that second question that you pointed out, it's not is the U.S. ready for a war with China, because it won't just be the U.S. fighting. The U.S. would have Australia, would have the United Kingdom. He said he thinks Philippines would join the war, would have Japan. What did he say? South Korea? Did he say South? I think it was South Korea. So it's not like, no, it's just not the U.S. It wouldn't just be the U.S. versus China. It would be the U.S. and allies versus China. So, and he's like, yeah, as far as that, I think we're pretty ready
for a war with Russia. Again, the U.S. isn't the hokey pokey. We have a number of allies within NATO that would be called to fight, and every single one of those allies has its own advantages. Estonia is fantastic at cybersecurity and cyber warfare. Countries like Poland, their military is gearing up for the next conflict. France has some excellent scout units. Greece has a pretty darn good Air Force and maritime units, and they're in a very strategic location. And of course, we have Switzerland and Finland, who are used to operating in the cold. They could be charged with handling anything in the north. I mean, all of these allies bring their own unique and very special capabilities to the fight. And so it's not, is the U.S. ready for war with Russia? It's, is NATO ready for war with Russia?
I love that.
Heck, we already have a lot of equipment pre-positioned inside Europe. So if, God forbid, deterrence fails and NATO does go to war with Russia, we have all of that equipment already staged. We don't have to get it across the ocean. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
So the next question is the U.S.
So it's like you're as prepared as you've done everything to be as well prepared as you possibly can be. And again, he said it wouldn't be the U.S. ready for a war with Russia. It'd be NATO, in which you have all of these allies who are very strategic in so many different things, which I really didn't know. So I'm glad he pointed that out and kind of said what everybody's strategic at. Because like I said, I'm very new to like learning about different countries and militaries and what they're great at, and it's just really kind of cool to learn. And so it's like, I think there's too many deterrents for Russia or China to like want to go to war with the NATO. I won't say the U.S. I'll say NATO, because if you attack the U.S., you're attacking NATO, because then you're gonna have to fight everybody. I think there's too much deterrence. I don't think it would break out, but I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I'm new to this.
Is currently ready for a war with both Russia and China. Well, I actually think so, and here's why. It's because each theater, the European theater and the theater in the Pacific, each theater would be a different method of war. In the Pacific theater, we're mainly going to be doing naval and air combat. In a European theater, we're mainly going to be doing air and land combat. So in the Pacific theater, it's going to be mainly a Navy and Marine show with a little bit of Army. And in the European theater, it's going to be an Air Force and an Army show. So since both of those conflicts have two different domains, essentially the land domain and the sea domain, since they have two different domains, then fighting on two fronts at the same time really won't be that much of an issue.
Okay.
So the next question is, if the U.S. is not ready for war with China, Russia, or both, do you see the U.S. being ready for war before war breaks out? So like I said before, we're never going to be totally ready, right? Just like having a kid. You're never going to be totally ready for that new life, right?
I feel
and all
that.
the disruptions that are involved. I don't necessarily see like a draft happening. I do see like National Guard or reserves being called up to perform different kinds of duties, and the National Guard is really good at deploying, getting ready to go and actually executing those missions. The National Guard is a vital component to America's defense matrix. So, yeah, I think we would be ready in that sense. Although when it comes to the National Guard, they would need 8 to 12 weeks to get fully trained up to enter the fight. Next question is, how would our war readiness change?
Yeah, it's just basically as ready as you can be. The U.S. is for anything to occur. It sounds like so far with these questions, it's been a lot of just is U.S. ready for war with China, with Russia, with both. Is U.S. ready for a war? Period. And he's like, yes, like no, you're never going to be totally ready, but U.S. is ready as they can be and prepared as they can be for any threats or anything that could happen.
Change depending on if either Biden or Trump were reelected this year.
Ooh, that's interesting.
I don't really see that changing all that much. Presidents, they don't tend to have that much of an effect on things, and our Constitution is kind of built around that. There's that separation of powers. The presidents can try to influence things, but they don't really have that much power without Congress agreeing to go along with things. So,
thank you for that.
I don't necessarily see the policy changing in any kind of extreme unless somehow Congress is flipped to the same party as the president. The next question is
I always say when it comes to a lot of things with the president, I'm always just like, they say the president is the most powerful man on the planet, but I just feel like the president is more of a figurehead. I feel like because if he was the most powerful man on the planet, I feel like what they say they want to happen would happen. But I feel like a lot of the times they say they want to make certain things happen, and then when they get into power, they're like, well, I'm trying my best to make things pass, but I can't. It's a process. It takes time, and I can't get it to pass. And it's like, because there's a balance of powers. He doesn't have full power. So how can you be the most powerful man if you can't make happen what you want to happen? He said he can influence things, but you don't have that much power to change a whole lot. You feel me? But I'm one who believes. I'm not a big conspiracy theory believer, but I still believe there's powers behind the president that really kind of run the show, and the president is more of a face of the country. But that's just me.
The same party as the president. The next question is, in the case of the U.S. is not ready for war and war begins, how can the U.S. catch up? I know we went from a completely civilian economy to the arsenal of democracy during World War II. Do we still have that industrial capability? So no, we don't. We outsourced a lot of manufacturing to China, which was a big problem. And so there's just fewer machine tools and factories that can be re-geared towards war production. And I think we saw that during the pandemic, where we couldn't even make our own masks. And I remember going like, why can't we make masks? What the heck? How hard is it to make a mask? Well, it's not that it was hard to make a mask. It's just that masks were 3 cents cheaper making them in China, or whatever the number was, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't make any sense to have mask factories in the U.S. because China could do it for X amount of cents cheaper. 20 years ago, if you were the CEO of a manufacturing company and you weren't in China, the board was going to fire you, right? If you weren't doing your manufacturing in China, because why would you miss out on saving all that money? Well, now, if you're the president of a company and you are doing manufacturing in China, you're going, maybe I've been hanging out with the wrong friends, because China is only like one pen stroke away from ruining your entire business,
Oh,
right? They can just say, "Oh, we're not going to manufacture this thing anymore. We call it illegal." Well, now you're stuck, right?
oh,
So we do need to bring manufacturing back to America, and that is something that many companies are looking at, because China's a wild card right now. We have no idea what kind of wacky thing they're going to come up with next, and they're just not reliable as a trading partner. So we have taken steps to create more munitions here. We just opened up, we either were just opened up or we're on the way to opening up another factory to create artillery munition. We've increased production of various weapon systems, missiles, and so on. So how long would it take to catch up? I mean, it would probably take at least another year or two to get on a good war footing. We probably have enough stuff to fight for 6 months right now. Now that kind of depends on what munitions that we're using. Now, if we're talking about the Pacific, we really only have like 30 days worth of weapon systems in the Pacific, and then we need to start moving stuff around. So we might have a little bit of trouble in the Pacific just because of the tyranny of distance. We're moving weapon systems across a very large ocean, I think 6,000 some mile ocean. So that could be an issue. No matter how far we catch up, we still have that logistics problem of dealing with the Pacific. A little bit easier in Europe, though. But I would say probably about 2 years to really get on a war footing if we're talking about a major war that isn't over in a couple of months. So finally, how does the U.S. government itself combat
I feel that. I feel like that's new information to me, so that's interesting. So the Pacific, the logistics, only like 30 some days worth. And then I knew that the U.S., a lot of manufacturing went over to China. Or I just didn't know specifically China, but I knew that U.S. like outsourced for a lot of manufacturing things because they can have things made for cheaper over in different countries, which U.S. is definitely all about profit, all about the bottom line. You know, profit is key. Cash is king. So when it comes to that, they're always gonna do things as cheap as possible so they can profit as much as possible. Definitely understand that. So it would take 1 to 2 years to become fully like where U.S. I guess wouldn't have to depend on any other sources for manufacturing and resources, and if it was a very lengthy war, it would take the U.S. a while for everything to be made in house. I guess is what we're saying. And so right now, most things they have about 6 months worth of fighting capability, unless it was like out on the Pacific where you got about 30 days. That's interesting. But again, it's not just the U.S. that will be fighting; it's NATO as a whole.
Disinformation campaigns from foreign domestic advisors? They just ignore it entirely. Honestly, they really don't do anything, and that's a huge issue. Now, part of that issue is that in the U.S. we have freedom of speech. So if you have some American in the U.S. that supports Russia, and they repost Russian propaganda, and they talk about how the United States military is woke and we would never be able to win a war with Russia, they're lying, but that's still freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
Even freedom of speech even covers lies. So there's really not a lot you can do about it from the standpoint of punishing people for supporting Russia. That might be different if we changed some laws and considered people who are talking about or supporting Russia to be enemy combatants. It's another thing if they help fund Russia. People who, what was that woman's name? Like Dembas Devushina or something. There was this one mentally ill woman who was posting in support of Russia and taking money in support of Russia. And if any of that money got over to Russia, she's going to be in a lot of trouble, and people who donated to her are going to be in a lot of trouble. Same thing with the Real Reporter video that I did. I did a response to Real Reporter, who was this guy who talked about some NATO vehicles that were captured in Ukraine, displayed in Moscow, and then Real Reporter did a video about my video, and from that, video response that he made, we were able to correlate the bot network that was taking a look at that video and commenting on it. And from that, we can even cross-reference that with emails of people who supported Real Reporter through Patreon. And I would not want to be one of those people, because bypassing sanctions is like a criminal offense. But really, the government doesn't really put out propaganda to counter Russian propaganda. And there are some things like Voice of America, which really tells the American side of the story, usually over radio, internet, and TV. So Voice of America might be one thing, but we don't really have any kind of active defense against Russian propaganda, because there is freedom of speech in that country, in this country, and any kind of government censorship of speech, that's going to make people get out the plate carriers and Hawaiian shirts, right? So you kind of don't want to go toward that. Now, if we're talking about foreign actors who are putting out propaganda, I've actually advocated for ways of disrupting those networks, either through cyber attacks or kinetically, meaning going after some of those propagandists and propagandist companies kinetically, which is its own can of worms. But how they decide to do that is kind of up to them. But I've stood up on podiums and I've explained how we need to start doing this, because if information war is a domain of warfare that's no different than cyber or air or sea or land warfare, then people that are distributing, foreigners that are distributing disinformation, are combatants, and they should be targeted just like combatants. So that's pretty much it. I hope this answers your question. And I wouldn't be too worried about any kind of conflict as long as we keep funding Ukraine appropriately. Ukraine will fight, and they will attrit Russia, and eventually it will get to the point where Ukraine won't necessarily win, but they will certainly lose less and be in a position of strength rather than weakness when it comes to negotiating for peace. So hopefully we can kind of stick with that plan and give Ukraine the tools they need to finish the job. Thank you guys so much for watching.
I really like his video. I feel like he's very, very educated about the subject, very knowledgeable about the topics, and I feel like I've become more knowledgeable just by watching this video. Of course, there's still a lot I have to learn, and a lot more that I'm fascinated to learn. But yeah, I guess you can't really mess with the freedom of speech. I feel like that's a huge thing in the Constitution here, and I don't see that really changing. But in terms of like funding or supporting, it's like, no, you can't. You're going to get into a lot of trouble if you give money to like Russia and help fund their war or anything like that. You get into trouble, which is completely understandable. And disinformation or misinformation, in terms of treating those as combatants as soon as they start spreading misinformation, I don't know too much about that. So I'm going to keep my opinion away from that, because I wouldn't even know how to form a good opinion about that. So that's all we have. If you enjoyed that reaction video, make sure you check out this one. Make sure you subscribe. It's your boy Neal. Out.